Hey guys, 16-Bit Dad here, and welcome back to this retro writing series where we basically go around and look at the themes, storyline and general plot of various different retro games. Today's episode we're going to be looking at the survival horror known as Fatal Frame or Project Zero in the EU, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly specifically. So let's get to it, shall we? Okay, so Fatal Frame 2, as a survival horror game, it does. You expect it to have a very short storyline. Most of them do, because you can finish the games typically in a handful of hours. Some of them, for example, Resident Evil, even try to get you to complete them in under 2 hours. So they usually don't have a massive amount of plot in them. The Fatal Frame games, on the other hand, do have a lot of emphasis on storyline. Each ghost in the game has their own backstory, their own characterization, but we're not going to be looking at individual characters for this because, to be honest, if I did that it would probably take at least as long as the actual game just to do it, if not longer. So yeah, rather than do that, we're going to focus on just the main themes of the game. Specifically, they are sacrifice, the bonds of family, broken promises, malice, and loss. The game kind of covers all of those in various different aspects, but we're going to be looking at the most important aspects of each of those ones. So if we start off with sacrifice, pretty much the entire plot of the game revolves around it to begin with, but the specific sacrifice for Fatal Frame 2 is the Crimson Sacrifice Ritual. I couldn't remember if it's Crimson Butterfly Sacrifice, but it's just Crimson Sacrifice Ritual. This particular ritual revolves around I think it's the younger twin having to kill the older twin, who is then thrown into a pit called the Abyss, to basically stave off the negative energy that's within that abyss, because otherwise it will come out, spurt out into the world, and at the very least destroy the village. The sacrifice itself is a major part of the storyline. It's the driving force of the storyline from the background. The main driving force is the bond between Mio and her sister Mayu, but the main background storyline is all about the ritual. Basically, every now and then, in this particular lost village that the game takes place in, they have to carry out this ritual to protect the village, and that's led to a lot of family murder, basically, throughout the centuries. The three most important ones, in terms of the story for Fatal Frame 2 itself at that specific time, it's the sacrifice between Itsuki and his brother. I can't remember his name, where Itsuki had to kill his brother. Then after that you also had Yae and Sei, where Yae had to kill Sei. And then you've got the current timeline where the game is basically trying to make Mio kill Mayu. That's kind of how the plot begins and what the background force behind the storyline is. Now, Itsuki, he did kill his brother, but I believe it didn't quite go right. It wasn't quite in time, or they didn't quite do something the way they were supposed to, so it didn't work. So because of that, the anger and the malice and the evil energy that was inside this abyss started to manifest itself. So that led the village to turn to Sei and Yae to try and repeat the ritual and basically save themselves. However, Sei and Yae tried to escape. That didn't quite go to plan, and so various things happened that we will come into when we look at the Broken Promises section, but effectively that sacrifice failed as well, which led to the village basically becoming infested with hate and anger and lost souls, and that's where the game starts. You guys find this. You as Mio with Mayu following you stumble across this lost village, and that sets things into motion for the game. So then if we move on to the family bonds, the most obvious one is the bond between Mio and Mayu themselves. They are incredibly close as sisters and twins. They spend all their time together, they do everything together, they look after each other constantly. Mayu is the generally weaker of the twins, even though she's older, so Mio spends most of her time kind of protecting and helping and look after Mayu. They're basically inseparable. They love each other and they're so connected as sisters that you can't... It's not supposed to be a breakable bond between them. And that's a really, really big aspect of their characters throughout the entire game, because Mayu will go missing constantly throughout the game, and Miu, in the face of horrific ghosts trying to kill her and horrible sacrifices and disturbing imagery and everything that she sees throughout the game, is constantly trying to get back to her sister because of how close their bond is. So it really pushes forward this idea that a family bond is incredibly important in life, because these two will do anything to basically stay together. At least that's what the main idea of the storyline is. There are multiple endings, which we will get into, but the main ending and the canonical ending and most of the alternate endings revolve around the fact that Mio and Mayu are so connected as siblings that almost nothing can break it. The other side of it would be looking at the guilt that Itsuki feels, because he cared about his brother and he was so connected to his brother that when he actually had to murder his brother for this sacrifice and failed, he was so guilt-driven for two reasons. One, because obviously he murdered his brother, and two, because he did it to help the sacrifice and yet he failed. So he murdered his brother for effectively no reason. So this drives a massive amount of guilt and sadness into this character for the entire storyline of the game and for the countless years that have followed after he actually did it, up to the point of the game starting. So again, it shows the other side of the family bonds, where you don't want to effectively let your family down. You want to do everything you can for them, even if you have killed them. It's a horror game, things are a bit weird, we know that much, but basically the family bonds for Itsuki is also a driving force into why he wants to help Mio find Mayu, although he sees them as Yae and Sei, respectively. So again, family bonds are really important to the storyline in terms of driving the characters forward. So then if we move on to the broken promises, that's kind of what, as well as the Crimson Sacrifice ritual itself, broken promises are kind of what sets everything in motion. So, and I think this is one of the major points of the story, one of the biggest themes of the story in Fatal Frame 2. So, as I already mentioned, when Itsuki's sacrifice of his brother failed, the village turned to Yae and Sei to perform the Crimson Sacrifice ritual. They tried to flee with Itsuki's help because he didn't want them to go through the same thing that he'd been through with his brother. So again, family bonds come into it. The guilt meant that he tried to help this other pair of twins with a strong family bond to escape. Yae managed to escape. Sei was captured. So with the negative energy coming out of this abyss, the villagers were panicking and trying to think, what should they do? Should they try the sacrifice without Yae and just sacrifice Sei without following the standard rules of the ritual, or should they wait for Yae? Now, Yae had promised Sei that they would always be together no matter what. So Sei, out of her love for her sister and her trust in her sister, relieved her and told the villagers to wait because Ye will return. She's promised that she will, but time went on, not very long, a very very short amount of time, so not very long at all. But it became very apparent that Ye wasn't coming back. She'd broken her promise to Sei, and she wasn't going to return. So the villagers took Sei down to the sacrifice room, hung her, and then threw her into the abyss. But because the sacrifice involves a twin killing their older twin, it failed again. So because of Itsuki's failure, and then also because of Sei's sacrifice failing, the negative energy basically burst out, bringing back with it the very angry spirit of Sei, as well as the, if I can pronounce it right, the Katsbi, or no, Kusabi, the Kusabi spirit as well, who was a previous sacrifice. So suddenly these two very now malevolent spirits came back in amongst this mass of negative energy and basically killed everyone in the village, and they all turned into ghosts, and Sei ended up waiting forever as the de facto undead ghost ruler of this now long dead village. The village disappeared from history and pretty much from sight as well, and was just left to the ghosts forever because Ye broke her promise to Sei. So that itself, this one broken promise, basically destroyed the entire village and sets up for the entire horror of the game itself. Another point that proves this is the non-canon ending called the runaway ending. We'll get into the other endings later on after we've gone through the main points, but I want to deal with this one here because it fits in so perfectly with this, because it is exactly about broken promises. Because Miyu and Mayu had made the same promise, the exact same promise that Ye and Sei had made about always being together. But one of the endings happens when during the game you as Mio and Mayu are together, and you realise that there is a way to escape through this tunnel, and you can get out of the village and basically be free and survive. The exact same tunnel that Ye and Sei were going to use. The twins start heading down towards this tunnel and trying to escape, but just as it happened with Sei, Mayu gets captured and by the ghosts and taken off for sacrifice. At that point you have two options. You can either go back into the village and try to save Mayu, keeping your promise of always being together, or you can effectively do what Ye did and just absolutely run for it down this tunnel. All the way along, you'll actually hear Sei's voice shouting at you, "Are you leaving me again? Where are you going? Are you leaving me again?" And then as you get to the end, you'll get a cutscene that shows Mio standing outside the village, looking back and screaming for Mayu's name because she's worried about what's going on with Mayu, but she now can't get back to the village instead. So Mayu and Sei are basically just, they're gone, and Miyu is she's free, but she has to live with the guilt that she left her sister behind. That ending actually ends with a game over rather than an actual ending, but it is an ending to that particular story if you choose it, and the fact that it's a game over shows that Fatal Frame 2 really puts a lot of emphasis on the idea of promises and the fact that you're supposed to keep them as much as you possibly can, and that breaking them can have really bad effects on not just you but the people around you. That's why I think it's such a major part of the storyline. So then the next thing we want to look at is malice. Now, malice is basically anger and hatred. That's Sei and the Kusabi ghost in a nutshell. That's it. That's their entire driving force throughout the length of the game. They are so angry for being sacrificed. They're so angry that their sacrifice was a waste of time and a failure, and that their lives were basically taken away for nothing, that they came out and they slaughtered an entire village. As ghosts, they just killed everyone and turned them into ghosts, who were basically trapped there forever because these two spirits were so full of anger. It's only when, in some of those endings, that malice and anger is taken away that things go back to normal. So, personally, I take from this that the game's trying to tell you that anger isn't worth it. Anger makes sadness, and sadness makes anger, and anger makes sadness, and it's a big circle. As they say in Star Wars, it basically leads you to the dark side. So you need to find a way to deal with it, because otherwise it's just going to balloon out of control, and while you're hopefully not going to end up killing an entire village and enslaving the ghosts of those people that you've killed, you are going to make things very difficult and uncomfortable for you and everyone around you. So basically find a way to deal with that anger. That's what the game kind of tells me. That was a really short bit, but that's really all there is to that theme. But it is a very important theme to the overall story of the game. The last one is loss. I think in terms of storyline and indeed physical, or was I physical, but the graphical nature of the game, that's played out mostly through the fact that surviving twins at the end of the Crimson Sacrificial Ritual, apologies there, their hair will go white over time out of pure despair and regret for what they've done. Dealing with the loss of a twin is hard enough as it is, but when that loss is by quite literally your own hands strangling them to death, it takes on a whole new form of just emotional, not even baggage, emotional destruction really. The game really does look at what loss can do to you, both mentally, physically and emotionally, and how it can utterly ruin you. That then carries on to the canonical ending, and as I said, we'll go through some of the endings in a bit, but the canonical ending is basically the final version of the ritual that we're talking about. Miyu and Mayu is successful, and you can understand what that means, but we'll cover it more in a second. But basically, it's successful, and suddenly you have the same feeling of loss going on again. But as you as the player have spent the entire game trying to get to Mayu and trying to save her, if you get the canonical ending, you actually feel that loss as well. That's why I think it's such an important part of the storyline. One of the major themes is that you actually get to feel it yourself. So then if we look at the endings, there's a few different endings. There's more actually in the Wii version, the Wii remake, but we'll stick with just the PS2 for now. There's the aforementioned runaway ending, where you basically just give up and leave your sister to her fate, and then you get a game over because you broke the promise. There's the normal ending, which is also the canon ending, where Mio finally finds Mayu in the sacrificial room, surrounded by ghosts of the villagers. Mayu then takes Miyu's arms, puts Miyu's hands onto her neck, and Miyu strangles her to death. And then Mayu is thrown into the abyss, and the sacrifice is complete successfully. Mia then has to basically live with the guilt for the rest of her life that she murdered her sister in order to survive. It's a really quite depressing and very, very strong ending to a game where you've spent the entire game trying to save this person, but in the end you're the one who has to kill them. So it comes back again to that loss, that theme of loss. Another ending you can get is where it's a happy ending, where Ye and Sei kind of take over Mia and Mayu's bodies respectively at the sacrificial point, and then at the last minute Ye, through Mio, grabs Mayu and Sei falls out into the pit, into the abyss again, whilst Mio is able to hold onto Mayu and save her, but at the same time Mio looks straight into the abyss by accident and basically all those spirits and death and stuff flood into her eyes and permanently blind her. At which point Mayu, going on with the family bonds and the promise of always being together, has to then take care of Mio for the rest of her life, and is happy doing it, and actually says, now it's my turn to look after you. I believe those are the 3 endings you can get on the PS2 version. At least they're the only ones that I've seen. But even the endings do fit into these themes. So obviously Family Bonds is the non-canon ending where Mio becomes blind and Mayu happily looks after her for the rest of their lives. The Broken Promise ending where you run away and then leave Mayu to basically live forever on as a ghost inside the town, just as Sei had to live in the same way from when Ye ran away. And then you've got the canon ending, which deals with loss, because you spent the entire game trying to find and save Mayu, only for you to be the one who actually kills her at the end. Those are pretty much the entire themes of the game Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly. It's not a happy game in the slightest. It's an amazing, wonderful game, especially for a survival horror game. It's probably my favourite survival horror game ever made. But the storyline is really, really dark, really depressing, and the canon ending, which leads into the 3rd game, The Tormented, is really hits hard. As I said, you feel that loss. So I think while those 5 sacrifice, family bonds, broken promises, malice, and loss are the 5 main themes of the game, I think the biggest ones are basically loss, broken promises, and family bonds, because they make up the 3 endings, and then the canon ending, loss. I think loss is basically the top number 1 theme of Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, a like, share and subscribe would be really appreciated. I'll be putting up a poll on Twitter within the next couple of days to determine what the next game we cover in this retro writing series is. So make sure you check out my Twitter, follow me on there, and then you get to vote for which of the 2 games that I put up that you want to see. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great day.